But this is one of 3 events that we are doing to try to highlight the need for collaboration, creative thinking on the issue of stormwater. This summer really highlighted, I think, for us, and not the first, not the last, that this is an issue we need to be thinking of as a community. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background as a primer for some of our other speakers and panelists, and so hopefully I'll be fairly quick. The watershed, or sometimes called the catchment, it's a common area of land that flows to a common outlet. In this case, everything eventually will drain to the ocean. And in this area, right, a lot of it does go to the Mascoma, then Connecticut, down to Long Island Sound, and eventually as part of the ocean. And how it interacts along that pathway there has a big impact on how it benefits or hurts us. Whether, how it interacts, what the topography is like, what the slope is like, what the soils are like, but also what the land use is like. Farms, roads, homes, factories, forests, all these things are playing into what happens to that rain when it falls. I'm just going to do really brief, it's a little background on the science. I can't go too deep into this. I'm sure others here can probably do a lot more than I can. But at least at kind of a foundational level, a couple of different things that water can do when it falls, right? It can soak into the ground, it can infiltrate. Some of that may go into the groundwater and replenish our aquifers, or be used in our well systems, or even as surface waters in our public water supplies. Some of that can, especially in the summer, go off into evaporation, go back into the atmosphere, and some of that can run off downhill somewhere else. This graph over here on the left is a hydrograph, and these are really unique depending on the catchment and the storm event. But what I wanted to highlight here is this yellow bar is the base flow, or what's the flow that's typically going underground, what soaks into the water, and then it's slowly releasing, usually much more slowly. The blue is typically that stormwater runoff. And this peak is kind of illustrating the potential flood, the degree of flooding, the flashiness. And if you can subdue that, right, move more of this into here, I think that's a lot, basically, in a very basic way, some of what we're trying to do. So that water goes down, it's reducing flooding, and it's reducing a lot of other things at the same time. Now, some things we can't control. We can't control when they come, where they come, how intense they are. A lot of, again, the news this summer was just tribute to how important this is and how much we can't control it. These are just a few of the headlines that we're seeing, and there are a lot more. But there are some things that we can control, and I don't think we can't feel like this is beyond our capacity, or that we can fully. It has to be somewhere in the middle, right? We have some control over this. So location is one thing. I'm not going to speak too much to that tonight, because a lot of that has to do with our regulations and our site plans, and how decisions are made at that level, contractors, how that is a really important topic, not the main focus of this evening. The impervious cover is, sorry, so this graph here is showing you, right, there's forest on both of these sides. And typically that's going to allow more transmission or more infiltration, more storage, so that water slowly percolates through the soil and into the stream there. Now, if you have impervious, if it's impervious, either it's a building, unless you have a green roof or some sort of pervious pavement here, maybe there are some trees that are catching water and infiltrating it there. So there could be some things happening, but largely a lot of that is flowing off and carrying whatever it catches along the way with it. Sometimes these are necessary, and they have a role when they're needed, but it does have that impact in terms of stormwater runoff. Grass, if it's sloped, it tends to, right, go downstream. Gravity likes to work. But the grass, the roots don't go as deep. You don't have as much surface area on the plant matter, all sorts of aspects that are changing the potential for that water to infiltrate. Even though it's vegetated, it's not going to hold as much as a forest. I think anybody's going to notice that. If you've walked through the forest, if you've walked on grass, you're going to notice it stays wet longer in the forest. Oh, sorry, one thing I forgot is the roughness. So even on these sloped areas, I mean, it's harder to control because it's got some momentum with it. And sometimes, you can, if it's a straight shot like this and it goes like one of those slip and slides, and you're going straight down, you're getting it off, it's not going to have much opportunity to infiltrate or even slow down. Because even just slowing down, you're going to change that peak, right? It takes longer to get to the end point, and you can subdue that peak a little bit just by slowing the water. So things like roughness or the texture of the landscape, even on a steep slope, can help to create a longer time for the water to move around. It might hit some turbulence. It might hit some friction that's going to slow it down. It gives the opportunity for, say, pollutants to drop out. And also it does have the opportunity for things to infiltrate and go back into the soil, where there's that opportunity to soak in the soil there. So one of the impetus, our regional planning commissions work a lot with the towns. And so one of the impetus for these events was a survey we did with municipal public work directors of public work, road agents, highway departments, and there was a lot of really great information that we got there, and just trying to understand better what they are dealing with and the strategies they're using to try to manage stormwater to the best of their staff and funding capacity. And a few things that I wanted to highlight for the purposes of tonight. There are copies of kind of the summary, and I'm glad to discuss it more with anybody who's interested. Jim did participate in the survey, so we appreciate Enfield's participation in that. 17 out of the 27 communities did participate, and it did kind of stretch the gamut of different densities. So all agreed to have broad public support for their work, so that's really exciting to see strong community support for these really important and critical departments. 67% of them are upsizing their culverts as a just standard practice at this point. They're all seeing increased storm events, are concerned about it, so anytime they have to replace it or they have the funding to, they're going a size higher. And when asked to grade their local system, one person said that they felt like they were fit for the future. The storms that they think that they might be seeing in the future, they think that they can handle it. They're pretty decently handled. 47% said they feel pretty good about where they are now, but not so much about what might happen next year or maybe 5 years from now. And 41% felt like they had areas that needed considerable attention. And one did say that they felt like they had a system that was at risk of some serious failure and was concerned about the funding and the ability to handle that. Most of them agreed that funding was the main challenge. Culverts are not cheap, and doing any other types of practices, whether either standard maintenance, it all takes staff, it all takes engineering to do a lot of the larger projects. There's a lot that goes into a landscape scale. You're thinking of a very tiny area that's trying to manage the stormwater for that entire catchment. I mean, that's a pretty big job. So tonight we are focused a lot on flooding, and there are a lot of co-benefits. Water quality, anything that water picks up when it's going downstream, that's a concern. That's a concern for public health. That's a concern for the safety of our ecosystems. Also, that replenishment of groundwater. While we're seeing more flooding, we're also seeing more droughts. So wanting to keep that water in the ground, but also collect it for our most optimal use for farms or for our own use is going to be increasingly something we need to think about, how that water cycle is working. Recreation economy, again, right, is really critical for this region. So keeping our waters and our areas healthy and being able to be accessed. Hear a couple people talk tonight about concerns on Crystal Lake and Mascoma Lake in terms of the water quality. Also, there's an opportunity for cross-sector collaboration. The watershed naturally lends itself to, you need to work with your neighbor, you need to work with your town, you need to work with the next person over there or up the hill and down the hill. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So tonight's agenda, we're actually going to switch this a little bit. So Tom Swenson's going from DES is going to present about some specific strategies at the small scale that you can do around rainwater when it falls on the ground. And then we're going to have a panel discussion to really dive into those topics and what some of the professionals are seeing on the ground and have a lot of time for Q&A.
So as I mentioned, I'm from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, and I'm here to share with you what our Soak Up the Rain program does. So to start off, and I know Olivia just talked about this a little bit, we need to talk about what the definition of stormwater runoff is. And as we just mentioned, it's basically water or snowmelt, which is important to think about as well, mostly in these warm winters that we're having where all the snow goes away and it has to go somewhere, and also in the spring when the snow again has to melt and go somewhere. So it's water from the rain or melting snow that doesn't soak into the ground. And you can see in this picture, I'm going to see if the laser pointer does not show up, so we're going to point. You can see here that the water is running down and it's going into the storm drains, which is important to think about when we're talking about water quality, because everything that is on your lawn, like chemicals, stuff like that, fertilizers, dog waste. Dog waste is a big one. A lot of people don't pick up their dog poop, for lack of a better term, and it can get washed down into the storm drain where it normally goes untreated directly into a water body. So when we talk about stormwater runoff, we're really talking about, again, anything that isn't soaking into the ground that might be coming off your residential property or even a business property, anything like that, and it can come from a majority of places. First, you can see the runoff coming off the roof, and that's a big thing. Mostly if you have older shingles, you have to think of the heavy metals that might be leaching out of there, and this water runs down and then hits the ground and then flows into a catch basin or a storm drain. The runoff can also come from your driveway, and that's also something to think about because whatever you put on your driveway is going to end up in the stormwater as well. So if you're using a lot of salt, that can be an issue. If you've got a leaking oil container, anything like that, anything that might be coming out of your car or out of your garage is going to end up in that stormwater, bringing those pollutants into our water bodies. And something that a lot of people don't think about is that, yes, a lot of the times a lawn can absorb water, but the older it gets, and if it has a lot of compaction, if you have kids, if you're using any sort of like heavy machinery on there, it can almost become an impermeable surface where the water doesn't go in. So it's important to think about whatever you're putting on your lawn is getting picked up with this runoff, and your lawn is also creating runoff since it might not be soaking in directly. So why do we care about stormwater? And I know Olivia just talked about this, but we care about it for a majority of reasons. One, the increased flooding. So the less water that is absorbed into the ground, it has to go somewhere. Mostly this summer, as we all saw, people were having washouts like they've never seen. We lost roads, we lost bridges, and that's because we've been getting a lot of rain and it's not able to soak into the ground. We also care because, again, we're talking about those pollutants that get picked up by the stormwater. So anything that, again, gets washed down into in your water body, in your watershed, no matter where it falls within this watershed, if you put it on the ground and it doesn't actively get taken up by a plant, or if you're overusing it like fertilizer, it's going to wash down some sort of channel, be it a stream, a river, or directly into a water body and start to pollute that water that you care about. And if you live around a lake or you recreate on a lake, a pond, a stream, any sort of water body, you can be unintentionally causing harm to it. And when all of the different businesses and homes that are producing stormwater runoff cause little bits of harm, a little too much fertilizer, a little too much salt, it can do some serious damage to our water bodies. So it's important that we, as residents, along with businesses and municipalities, do what we can to reduce the runoff that we're producing. So to help educate everyone and to help them understand what is available, mostly on the residential level, we have the New Hampshire, should know the title, but I don't, the New Hampshire Guide to Stormwater Management. And within here, there's 10 DIY, do-it-yourself stormwater solutions that are not very complicated. Yes, they're work, but it's not tens of thousands of dollars. It's things that you could do in a weekend or over a couple weekends to help mitigate your stormwater and stop it from running off into a water body or into a storm drain. And this is available online. We used to hand these out to everybody, but as the price of everything has gone up, so has the price of these, and we're funded through your tax money, so we don't want to waste all of our money printing these, and we want to be here at events like this. So I do have a couple copies here if you'd like one. I think I have 2 or 3 more, but this is all on our website, and we are also getting a new website. So the best way to find us, mostly if you do it in like a week or 2, would be just to Google New Hampshire Soak Up the Rain. And it should say like .New Hampshire at the end, and you know that you're at the right place. So within this guide, like I mentioned, there are 10 stormwater solutions that you can use as residents or as business owners to help reduce your stormwater runoff. A lot of them just talk about digging holes in the ground and doing different things in those holes, but they can make a big difference. So a lot of them are going to sound similar, but bear with me because they all serve a different purpose. And I'm going to go very briefly through this because there's a lot of information in this homeowner's guide. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to look up the guide. And it is important to note too, like anything with owning a home or living on a property, it does require maintenance. So it's not a set it and forget it, but usually the maintenance is a little thing. It's not like you have to redo it every year, but it's important that if you're going to make these, you commit to maintaining them so they work the way you want them to and do the most good. So our first type of stormwater solution is a drip line infiltration trench. And it's very simple. So as you can see, the rain is coming off this roof and falling directly on the ground. When it falls directly on the ground, it can loosen up a lot of sediment, which then that sediment runs off, and that's also the stormwater picking up the sediment, and anything within that sediment is going to end up in a water body. So what you want to do is you basically dig a hole, as you can see here, and you want to make sure that when you dig the hole, you kind of angle it away from the house because you don't want to be pumping water into your basement or anything like that. And you can line the edges with landscaper fabric so the soil doesn't fall in. And basically this water, or this hole, you fill with gravel, and then as the water falls down, it allows it to kind of be stored there and allows it to slowly trickle into the ground versus running right off your lawn or any sort of surface. So again, here you can see there was some erosion going on here where this blue line is. They made the infiltration trench, and now all of that will be caught, or at least a majority of it's going to be caught. And next we have a driveway infiltration trench, which is very similar to a normal infiltration trench, but it's under driveways. So most driveways are perched, so that way the water flows off, and driveways are long. I was just having this discussion with someone earlier that that's a lot of water that's flowing off. And what you can do is basically build or dig another trench, fill it with stone, and allow that water to enter this trench and then percolate back into the ground. And we have an example of this. This was at Phillips Exeter Academy. So you can see some of the damage that was going on. The water was coming off from the driveway and the house as well. And you can see that the sediment was pooling up here, that there was some damage, and then it was even flowing into the road, which can cause other issues for municipalities. So what we did was we worked with the homeowners to dig a trench all the way around. So now when this water flows off, it's flowing directly into this trench, and if anything also goes through, you can see that there's a garden right there. It's not a rain garden, but any sort of vegetated area is better than nothing to slow down that water and allow it to trickle back into the ground. Another type is a dry well, and most people have probably heard about dry wells, mostly if you have an older house. It's probably one of the easiest things you can do, where you're basically, again, digging a hole. A lot of these are about digging holes, lining it with that sediment, or not sediment, landscaping fabric, so the soil doesn't just collapse in on itself, and then filling it with stone. And this one's kind of versatile because you can do it 2 ways. You could just fill it with stone and allow the stone to be seen, if you're okay with that, if that's the aesthetic and it doesn't bother you, Or you could plant a garden on top of it and basically hose isn't the right word, funnel the water directly into the dry well through some, like off your gutter or something like that. So someone might not even know it's there because it's covered by the garden. It's not the same thing as a rain garden, and we'll go into that in a second, but again, you could just have a garden on top of this well and no one would know it's there. So here you can see that the water was coming off the roof and off this driveway, and initially it was going into this culvert and was being dumped directly into a water body. So again, all those pollutants untreated directly into that water body, which could be causing damage and causing flooding as well. And here we are working with the homeowner. This was in Greenland, and we dug this well and then filled it with the stone, so it's going to catch all of that stormwater as it runs off. And it is important to note that with a lot of these, it's good to have an outlet in case we get huge storms, so that way your well doesn't wash out and completely fill with water. It has a way out. Again, maybe we're not treating all the water, but we're treating something, and that's the big takeaway from this. Next, we have infiltration steps, and you might have seen some of these, mostly if you spend a lot of time around lakes or if you have lake or pond front property, but they're basically just a way to stabilize the ground around it and also reduce runoff and allow the rain to soak into the ground. So in this instance, you can see they had a lot of erosion here. You can see the sediment and the sand building up. Also very dangerous when it's wet. That's a good way to slip. And they basically took lumber, or you can also take stone, placed it in front of it, making steps, dug it out and put some gravel there. So that way the gravel is caught by the rain as it comes down and the runoff. It has time to soak in. It also looks more aesthetically pleasing, and you're less likely to slip on it. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody there. This is another example, and also example of where a lot of these practices are adaptable. Just because they're called infiltration steps doesn't mean you have to make them actual steps. You can see here that this is a relatively flat area. Clearly there's some slope, but there's a lot of erosion going on here, and they basically made one giant infiltration step. It's more of an infiltration area. So you don't have to do exactly what's in the handbooks. You can adapt it and make it your own. The concepts are very malleable. Next up, we have pervious walkways and patios, and also driveways. That comes up a lot. We had this discussion as well when we were in there. And this is another way that you can basically approach this, where if you have a large patio or a large path that might be leading somewhere, what you can do is dig it out, put some stone underneath it, again, kind of making a little hole, fill it with that gravel, and then you put these pavers or patio blocks on, but you don't put grout in the middle. Or you could use a pervious grout. But basically it lets the water go straight through instead of just hitting the patio and washing off kind of like a roof or a driveway. It's able to trickle through and sit in there in that reservoir and actually absorb into the ground. They also make products, I think they're called like hexagonal pavers or something like that, that let you put them in there and you can fill them with gravel, you can fill them with dirt. You can seed them. So as you can see there, there's a driveway that has, they're the pavers, but there's grass in the middle to take up that water. I'm also going fast, and I apologize. There's just a lot to talk about. We're going to have time for Q&A, so feel free to keep those questions, and I'll ask if anyone has any in a second. This is probably one of our most popular stormwater solutions, or rain gardens, because everybody loves plants. Everyone can relate to this. And rain gardens, they have so much utility, and they're amazing. But the big thing about rain gardens is to realize that it's not every site, or every site it can't have a rain garden. If you have an area that doesn't ever dry out between snowstorms, that's English, between rainstorms, that's not a good site because those plants are going to rot. When we say rain garden, you're looking for a site that definitely either has water flow through it, that holds water, but after the storm, after a couple hours, it's going to dry out, or maybe a day or so. You don't want it to be an area where the water never goes away. And a rain garden is pretty simple. You can see here that we have this ponding area. So you dig a hole, again, big theme here, we're digging holes, and you're going to fill it with some good permeable soil mix, but something that's good for plants to take root in. You want to make sure that it stays below your lawn line, basically, so that way, when the rain comes, it can flow in through your gutter. It also could just flow in through your lawn. You could channel it that way. And as the rain pools there, the plants and evaporation in the ground are going to take them in. So it's a win-win. You get this beautiful area with native plants if you can do that. And we do have a resource with that we worked with the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension to produce that has a bunch of native plants that are good for rain gardens. It tells you where they fit in like the slope of the rain gardens, what kind of sunlight they like. Honestly, even if you're not making a rain garden, it's a really good feature to look at if you're looking for native plants. So rain gardens, honestly, again, probably our biggest thing that we do, but it's important to assess if the site is the right fit for a rain garden. And on our website, we do have ways that you can do that. It shows how to dig a hole to see if the water is actually draining. And they give you, I think they ask you to watch it for an hour or two. And you can see if the water is actually draining or if it's like a clay bottom where it's just pooling. And this is an example of where we did a rain garden. You can see that there's some erosion over here on the picture on the left, and then it was running down this driveway. So they installed a rain garden right where that fence was. And that arrow over there to the left is the inlet letting in the water, and there is an outlet, again, in case there's too much water, because you don't want the rain garden to get destroyed, because plants are expensive, as we all know. So this is honestly a really good picture, and everybody looks happy after because it's so beautiful. So something to think about. And next up, we have rain barrels. And again, this is something everyone's probably heard about. These have been around forever. I think it might have been more of a necessity back in the day, and now we're looking at it as a way to reduce runoff. The one drawback with rain barrels are you don't realize how quickly they're going to fill up. So an inch of rain, I think it's on a roof a little less than 100 square feet, can fill up a 60-gallon rain barrel in a rainstorm. And so it's important to think about storage if you want to use it to water your flowers or something like that. And there you have options. Again, definitely get one with a spigot if you are going to do this, because a lot of people don't realize they want to take the water out until it's too late and you've spent like $60. And a lot of them also have soaker hoses that you can put towards the top, so that way if it does start to overflow, it'll slowly drain. Again, it's not releasing all the water at once, it's allowing it to slowly move out, so you're not getting that large amount of stormwater runoff. Some other options for rain barrels, if you're looking to do this, is you can have basically one on each side of the house, where you have one side of the roof draining to one and one side of the roof draining to another. And this is kind of my favorite one because I just think it's fun. But daisy chaining is basically when you connect a bunch of rain barrels. You could have a long line of it. So this is really good if you're looking to increase your capacity. Again, if you're using it to water, if you're going to supplement it. We do say that you shouldn't be using this to water your vegetables, because if you do have a shingled roof and it's a little older, there could be heavy metals. You don't want to be eating those. But it's really good for flower beds and stuff like that, or even your lawn. If there's parts of your lawn you're trying to seed, you could drain some of this water and water that directly. And next we have water bars, which are very similar to the infiltration steps, but they're kind of taken to the next level. And these are good basically to push water off into a vegetated area. You probably see a lot of these on hiking trails where you notice that there's either, again, some sort of stone or wood with some gravel behind it, and it's slanted, so as the water comes down, the water's pushed off into this vegetated area where it's slowed down and it's allowed to infiltrate into the ground. This is honestly a really bad case of erosion. Clearly, this was at a camp, or where was it, in Freedom, and they had some really bad erosion. What you can't see at the end of the photo, right to the right, there was that water body. So all that sediment was just flowing right in there. We worked with the campers, and the campers were able to install these water bars. I think it only took a couple hours, but there was a lot of them, and they were young, and they had a lot of energy. And they were really proud of it, and it looked fantastic after. I think we have, yes. So this is what it looked like after. Again, this lumber here with the gravel behind it is catching the water and pushing it off to the vegetated area. So again, in some cases, it's not about capturing the water, it's about diverting it elsewhere. And then there's another type of water bar called a rubber razor, and this would be really good for driveways, or if you've got like an ATV trail, where you basically get some, what is it? Conveyor belt, that's what I was trying to think the word of. The conveyor belt material, sandwich it between two pieces of lumber, kind of like an ice cream sandwich. You bury everything besides the rubber, and then when the water hits the rubber, you put some stuff behind it, obviously, and the rubber pushes it towards that vegetated area. So it's really good for driveways, and you see this a lot on lakefront properties. The one thing to note is, if you have someone plowing your driveway, you need to tell them these exist, or they're gonna rip them right up. We've heard some very distressed people there. And next we have vegetated swales. This is something that's usually done between culverts at the end of driveways and between properties. And the point here is to basically put things to slow down the water as it goes from culvert to culvert. So in this case, you have a culvert here and you have a storm drain. This is an example of a bad swale where you can see a lot of the erosion and there's not a lot of plants. A good swale would be grass. Grass counts as a plant, but you could also add a bunch of different plants, almost like a rain garden, preferably water-loving plants, and that'll slow down the water so it doesn't erode, and it also doesn't basically send as many pollutants into the ground. You can also put these check dams here, which slow down the water, and it almost works like a temporary dam. It makes it fill a little bit. Again, the water can infiltrate in, and it also slows it down so it doesn't do as much erosion. My last type is vegetated buffers. And this is something that many people might be doing and they don't realize it. But whenever you look at a lake, and I know NH Lakes can agree with me here, you should have some sort of natural buffer around it. You don't want basically a property that is lawn, a little bit of beach, and straight into the water body. Because again, all that runoff and all that nastiness, all those pollutants are going to go straight into the water body. So you want to leave, I think it's like 10 to, look at it, ish. Okay, some space. Never mind. Here, so okay, so but definitely some space here. Definitely some space with some vegetated plants. It can be more of a like manicured area, like you've got some hydrangeas and some lilies there. If you're looking for that aesthetic, if you like to garden, it doesn't have to be like wild plants. But if you're not a gardener and if you don't want to spend the money on the plants, you can also just let an area naturalize. So whatever plants that are just going to grow up, you can just leave them. And we also know that part of living on a water body is you want to see the water body if you're really close to it, so they don't have to be high shrubs. Any vegetation is good. So you can see here, these are all very low growing, and it's nice too. You can kind of give it that whimsical feel, and you can guide people down a path. You can make a path in there. Okay, wow, okay. Again, apologize going so fast, there's a lot here. But honestly, if there was anything to do, if you couldn't do a stormwater solution, if you didn't have the money or you were renting, the best thing you can do, and you could talk to whoever you rent from, is just to leave areas to naturalize or even have manicured areas. Again, you can see that people planted plants here, but anything that isn't paved. And grass is fantastic, but if you're able to have like this mulched area, these plants are able to take in that water a lot faster than the grass is. So just having this less maintained area really does help to soak up rainwater. And it's nice too if you're using native plants, because it gives homes and food for critters and stuff like that. It increases that natural feeling, which is good for you. And then we have some good housekeeping tips. Again, for people who maybe can't do or aren't ready to do these stormwater solutions, and they're easy things that you can just do before you do any sort of maintenance. So a few examples, and we have more of these in the homeowner's guide as well, is to get your soil tested before you apply fertilizer. Some people just apply fertilizer every year, not realizing that their yard's good. Like, you don't need to add more fertilizer. And the UNH Cooperative Extension has some soil tests. I think it's like $30 or $40, where they'll tell you what's in there, what it needs. Does it need lime? Does it need more nitrogen? And it's a good way to figure out what it actually needs, and you might not have to do anything. So in the long run, you're going to save money. Also, if you're wondering when you should water your lawn, getting a moisture gauge. I've seen, and I know we've all seen this, when you drive past like a business and it just rained or it is raining and the sprinklers are going. And we're all sitting there being like, I don't know if that's the best idea. So don't be them and try to check the water moisture of your lawn before watering, because it might not need it. And lastly, this is something you probably all heard of. When you mow, try to leave at least 3 inches. It sounds longer than it is. It's really not that bad, but it makes your grass stronger. They need less fertilizer. And when you are mowing, if you're willing to not bag the leaf or the lawn clippings, as they break down, they're basically a natural fertilizer. So you wouldn't have to fertilize your lawn, saving you money as well. And then really quickly, because I know I am close on time, just some resources that we have on our Soak New Hampshire website. Again, new website coming, just Google Soak Up the Rain New Hampshire. We have the homeowner's guide, and then we also have individual fact sheets about each of these stormwater solutions. So if there's one that you're like, oh, I really like that, I want to look into it, they're all online. You don't have to go through the guidebook unless you want to. We also have a lot of photo galleries, so if you're looking to see how people have done things, how they actually look when they're put in, there's some great photos up there. We've done a lot of projects. And we also have some tools to help you determine which solution is right for you. This flow chart basically has you identify what your problem is and what you're trying to fix, and it walks you through the steps to tell you what options are available to you, and you'll get the most bang for your buck out. And then lastly, and this is something I want to mention, this is the flower guide that we worked with the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, to create. Definitely take a look at this if you're a gardener, because there's some really good information on here. All right, so that was all the information that I had to throw at you. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yeah.
I'm wondering if you also work with municipalities or if you primarily work with individual homeowners.
So, this is like my new part of my job. This program does not work as much with municipalities, but I work with municipalities for stormwater, a select few of them, and we're trying to expand on how to reduce their stormwater pollutants and stuff like that. There's some in New Hampshire, there's 47 of them, mostly on the seacoast and towards like the southern center of New Hampshire that are under an EPA permit, and they have to reduce their stormwater. So yes, but not all of the municipalities. And I think our goal is to slowly expand outwards so we can work with everyone. Yeah.
What's better for the health of a lake, a paved road around the lake or a dirt road?
That is a tricky question right there. That is the $1 question.
I'm the expert.
Well, first off, thank you for calling me an expert, but I wouldn't go that far. I think it depends on how it's maintained, and that's a big part of it, because if the road isn't right, you're going to have a lot of that dirt running off. If it's not perched the right way, I think you're picking your demons. I don't know if I'd be the best person to answer that, to tell you the truth. But I can get you more information if you want, because we do have experts on that. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard that asphalt roofs have heavy metals, and is that, what heavy metals do they have?
I'm not sure. So Lisa Lucigian runs this program. I'm just helping her out. I think it's more of the older shingles that they're talking about, like the roofs that probably need to be replaced. I don't think the newer ones have them, but I know that's why they tell you not to water your garden with that. I don't know if it actually is a problem, but just legally, just in case. Don't want to be that guy. I'm not sure exactly what comes off, but I can look that up. We'll get your contact information, because I've heard it from Lisa and other sources from UNH, but no one ever says what metals they are, but I'll look into it. Anybody else have any questions? All right, well, I'm here if you do. And then if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Lisa Lucigian. She is the program coordinator. She's been doing this for like 10 years. She is definitely an expert on a lot of these things. And then please feel free to check out our website. We have our Facebook as well. And like reach out about anything. Even if it's stormwater related, feel free to reach out to Lisa and she can put you in contact with the right people. I think we're right on time too. Okay.
As I was thinking about this program and how to sort of start out with each of these gentlemen, I wanted to sort of talk about, and there's good news and there's bad news in this realm. I think we all know about the bad news, and I think we'll hear from each of these gentlemen about the bad news, and I guess maybe that's the place to start. This summer was kind of the bad news. We got a lot of bad news in terms of what happened with rain and just getting soaked on a daily basis. It seemed like summer that really never was. We had some great autumn weather, but not so great in the summer. So we'll get into the good news, I think, because there's technology and advancements and things that are happening that each of these gentlemen will be able to share. But I want to talk with each of them about sort of the bad news. I mean, I think we know what it is, and how does that impact your job area? Nick, we'll start with you. Sort of, let's talk about the tough things to get into to start with.
Well, so from our side, we're dealing with a lot of development and redevelopment, some new sites, some existing sites. And so when we're designing a site that has to tie into existing features, existing structures. So then we have to work with the town to understand what their capacities are of their existing systems. And we need to design the site to make sure that we're not causing any problems downstream. And it is challenging when the predictability of storms is becoming less certain. And so we're, over time, I've been in the Upper Valley now 15 years, and towns are now requesting sort of a higher level of storm that we design for, whether it's a 10-year storm, 50-year storm, 100-year storm, just what that level is. And so that becomes just a little bit of I mean, I don't want to accuse of changing the goalpost, but you know, it's an ever-evolving process.
Yeah, seems like we have the 100-year flood every few years now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the joke going around. Jim, what do you think is sort of the bad news?
It's the exact thing that Nick just said. It's the frequency of the sort of really damaging storms that we've been seeing lately. They do a lot of damage. It takes a long time to fix it. It costs a lot of money to fix it. You know, we get somewhat hogtied if we have a disaster, and you know, FEMA, they'll come in and sometimes, you know, help support some of the repairs, but they're very, very particular about you know, what you can do for an upsize. They want to replace like in kind, and the like in kind is not good enough now, and so, you know, you take that money, but then you're haggling with them over. I mean, this past week over a culvert header that we did to sort of support the culvert that we replaced, but because we made it a little bigger and a little heavier, they're like, ooh, that's not what we had in mind, and so you know, you run into that, and so we. You know, it's tough, and we do have some techniques that we've been trying, some new technology, some new equipment to try to help out with that. But again, you know, when you get those storms, it's you know, it's tough, it's catastrophic, it impacts people, it impacts the roads. You know, some people get trapped on a road because they can't get past a culvert or something like that, and it's very costly to fix it. Our culvert prices have doubled in the last 3 years. And so, you know, immediately you go to the budget committee and say, geez, you know, we need to double our budget. They're like, no, we're not doubling anything. And so then you're doing half as much work as you did before. And so, yeah, those are our big issues.
Jim, what would you say from your perspective as sort of the bad news? Right?
Yes, I'm a water quality person from Mascoma Lake. In other words, the state has this volunteer lake assessment program, which to be part of the program, you have to go out and take samples of the lake probably 3 times during the summer. And you do we don't do the analysis, the state does the analysis, but basically we want to test the quality of the lake, because people who live on the lake, they always want to know how good the lake is and what has to be done to keep it a good quality. So what we're seeing lately is such high runoff events. I mean, it frequently, you see, like the Mascoma River, which is a tributary that feeds into Mascoma Lake, it turns brown. You know, that's not good for the lake. And in one occasion, back in 2019 in July, we had a big washout upstream, and it just washed down. The Mascoma River was all brown, and then when that water entered Mascoma Lake, well, if you stood up high enough, you could see this leading edge of brown water going down the lake. And you know, we knew that wasn't going to be very good, but it brings a lot of sediment into the lake, and you know, we've noticed we sample at the deep spot. Well, the depth of the deep spot is getting shallower and shallower. And I think it's because, the collecting sediment is settling down into the lake. And of course, another problem that we had was visibility in the lake for the divers to remove the milfoil, the Eurasian milfoil plants that are invasive species. Well, if you don't have a good visibility, you get down in the water, you can't really see the plant. So we didn't do any plant removal this year. But basically, the quality of the water is important, for the properties around the lake and people who come in to use the lake. There's a couple beaches and boats come in to enjoy the lake. So that's the perspective that we're looking at, and we can see problems now. If that's going to be the way it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it kind of runs counterintuitive. You think we get all this fresh water in the form of the rain. Seems like the water quality in the lakes would be really high for all that fresh water, but actually tying on to what some of our earlier speakers had to say, it's bringing all of the pollutants into the lake. And we had algae blooms and
That's right,
cyanobacteria
yeah.
problems.
That's right.
Crystal Lake, we have Crystal Lake people here, was impacted by that. So it certainly was a tough summer, and that's sort of, like I said, sorry to start with the bad news, but I guess we'll get that out of the way. Because there is good news too. I mean, Mascoma Lake Association played a huge role in helping to clean up Mascoma Lake the last 50 years, because years ago it was an open sewer. And so they just have done amazing work in their 100-year history. And so they're to be congratulated. And we do have great community activism here in town going along with that. So let's maybe shift gears and talk about what some of the good news is. Tell us about some of the technologies that you guys are implementing and seeing getting used. I know maybe we can start with you, Jim. There was an article in the paper yesterday. Instead of having to do water sampling, UNH has now got some kind of a drone system that can actually find cyanobacteria from the air. Have you heard about this? I don't know if that. Tell us about what some of the good news is that you see from this perspective.
Okay, well, Mascoma Lake has had a lot of problems over the years because there was a mill upstream, and the town of Enfield discharged sewage straight into the Mascoma River, which flows into the lake. And not only is it a problem for recreation purposes, but it's also the water supply for Lebanon.
Mhm.
So, but one of the good things we saw starting around 2008 was the lake got a better rating. The trophic level, they call it, of the lake went from mesotrophic, which is a middle grade lake, to oligotrophic, which is the highest grade lake, like a Sunapee or some of these other lakes had oligotrophic. They're supposedly a higher quality water in there. And I think a lot of the reason why the quality went up was that the town of Enfield finally did put in a sewer system. They took all that sewage and sent it to the Lebanon wastewater treatment plant. And so that took a big input out right there, and then the Baltic Mill closed down, so that was another big pollution input. So those things helped to improve the lake quite a bit. But now with this, these high stormwater events, it's taking a turn the other way. Now we'll have to find ways of trying to control that. So,
Something I would add to it too, I work on a daily basis properties on lakefront, and I think the Shorelands program that the state of New Hampshire,
that's right.
the DES, has done a great job to really improve how we treat the lakeshore, and I would put that in the good news category. Some of people that own property on the lake, it's a big hassle, but I think people do see the value to it, because we don't want you cutting trees. We don't want you ripping out vegetation. We want the natural vegetation. So I think that program has done a great job for our water quality, and it's continuing to do so. So I would keep that in mind as well. Jim, what do you think sort of the good news is from your perspective?
I think one of the biggest ones is the awareness. You know, I mean, this fellow here comes and he's got a nice PowerPoint that points out some of the things that people can do to be proactive because it's important to do something with the stormwater. 30, 40 years ago, if you were designing Walmart, it was just how can we get the water off this parking lot and into the lake or into the river as fast as we can. And that was how the design techniques were done. And so, with the increased awareness of what the effect of doing that is, some of the regulatory things have been good. That's a little bit of a double-edged sword, especially for me. The permitting things. I've had culverts that exist that needed to be replaced, and I spend $6,000 to get the permit to do a $2,000 culvert, and it takes 6 months pushing me into the late fall when you hadn't ought to be replacing culverts. And so, that there's a little bit, but, overall, I think the water quality and just the awareness of what we do, on an ongoing basis. In public works, there's a lot of, new techniques and new equipment. The equipment that we use, to grade and to do, ditch work and that kind of stuff is far superior to what it used to be. And so, you can get in and get out quickly, get some seed down, and you're not having an open site for weeks upon weeks. We just purchased, and I can show you after if you wish, we just purchased a leaf blower. Now, we've always had leaf blowers. The first ones were on a backpack, and the guys would have to walk up and down the road and blow out the ditches. And then we went to a tractor with a 3-point hitch blower, and that goes around at 4 miles an hour, and it takes forever to do 66 miles of road in the town of Enfield. But this one, it's gas powered and it mounts in the back of a truck, and you have a control. You can control the angle of the blowing from the cab of the thing and the throttle. And so the guys can go drive around and blow leaves out of the ditches. And we have found, especially with the big drought last year and then all the rain this year, is the drought, there was no water to push all the leaves out of the woods, so those leaves stayed there. And so, this year, when all the rain came, they all came out in the middle of the summer instead of over the winter or whatever. And, a lot of the issues we had with culverts were they were getting clogged with sticks and leaves and that kind of stuff in these storms. And then once the culvert stops flowing, it jumps up onto the road and starts to wash down the side of the road. And so, that's one thing. Another thing we've been using is magnesium chloride on the gravel road surfaces. It's a kind of a binding agent for the roads, so it decreases the amount of grading that we have to do, so you're not stirring up that road surface 4 or 5 times a year. We can usually get away with once or twice. And then the road it's hard. It has a good mass to it and some tension. And so when you do get a heavy rain shower, it's less likely to erode and run down the ditches on you. And so we've been using a lot of that lately, and we've had great luck with it. It's really cut down the amount of time that we spend grading, and I think it's reduced a lot of the mud season. Used to have to close roads, and we've been good the last 3 or 4 years. We get some potholes and some washboard, but we'll take that any day over a big mud hole that's gonna destroy the road and cause people trouble with their vehicles and so forth.
Nick, what would you say good news is on your front?
I would definitely echo the awareness that's been raised in the past few years. Some of it's been forced on people by regulations, but at the end of the day, the regulations are actually effective to their end goal. And so we see folks, homeowners or developers, understanding why these stormwater practices need to be put into place. And we even see some who say, okay, that's the minimum, give me, 10% more or something, or they're looking, especially the past couple of years, understanding that climate change is making things a little bit different. So let's not just design for today. Let's look a little bit in the future and design a little bit extra, which is stellar. Another great thing is that the toolbox of practices that we saw this evening. There's just a good list of things we can choose from. Like was mentioned, not every practice is right for every site. You need to pick and choose and find the right site for the right practice, vice versa. And we have others as well. Like if you ever drive by a construction site, you see the big orange arches stacked up. Those are infiltration chambers. Stormwater goes into there. They're underground. They're buried. It creates a reservoir underground for stormwater to either infiltrate in the ground or sometimes it's just slowing it down. So the toolbox that we have to work with is it's fairly robust already, and people are always coming up with new things to add to it, which is nice.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we learned this year, my town manager sent me an email and said, that towns in New Hampshire now by law can create a storm water utility. So where there's density of population and people don't really have the ability to handle the water.
I wasn't going to mention that, but
that may be the future. There's a few towns that are considering that, and that's, I think, the future, because obviously it's something we all have to deal with, and it's becoming more of a problem when you put people closer together. You've got to really have some way to deal with that. And Lebanon has spent years and years separating stormwater from their sewer, because what happened was the stormwater would overwhelm the sewer system, and it would literally cause raw sewage to outflow into the rivers. So that's kind of a hot topic in terms of what we're doing up here on the municipal side. But talking specifics, Jim had sort of touched on it. Nick, you can kind of give us, if you guys all drive by here in Enfield, the new Jake's car wash is being installed up there where Brownie's Auto was. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you guys saw it as they were going, and you were just touching on it, that it's totally revolutionized what's happening. In the old days, as Jim was saying, was to get the water the heck off the site, literally dump it into the rivers. And so you had, dripping oil out of your car and the hot temperature of the water in the summertime just going straight into the Connecticut River or the Mascoma River. And now, tell us about what Jake's has as an example to sort of put the water from that site down.
So there's a few techniques that's being used there. The primary one is what we call gravel wetlands. And so underground there's a couple of feet of just open drainage gravel that you would see. And then on top of that there's some, we call it wetland muck. Just a layer, 8-inch layer of material where plants can grow. And so stormwater gets funneled into the reservoir underneath, and then the plants that are growing in the wetland muck, their roots go down into the gravel and uptake some of the pollutants and also help with evapotranspiration. So there's a series of those around, and then also to help control just the overall volume and the rate of stormwater leaving the site. They're not the arch chambers, but they're actually box chambers that look like milk crates. So they'll be underground as well. They'll just create voids underneath the parking lot. So for the larger storms, that'll hold the water before it gets into the gravel wetlands and controls through. That site in particular is a fairly damp site already. There's not a whole lot of opportunity for infiltration, so it's all about checking the speed of the water as it leaves the site, keeping that all in check.
Jim, talk about, we sort of joke sometimes that gravity's a bitch. Sometimes it's hard to work because obviously water's going downhill, whether you want it to or not. So talk about some of the big challenges on the municipal side with obviously working with the public and some of your challenges on public-private.
A good percentage of the roads in this town have been there for 200 years, and they were put there for farmers and for fields and that kind of thing, and they weren't always thinking about what that effect was. And so if you could go back in time and design a road system to lessen sort of the impact of some of these storms, it probably wouldn't look like it does today. And talked about upsizing culverts, and that's great. However, in Enfield, upsizing can be a challenge because of the ledge factor. And so, a culvert should have its diameter and cover over it in order to sort of properly support it. And, in a lot of places in Enfield, that's just impossible. And we have places on Shaker Boulevard where the mold board of the grader is scraping ledge in the middle of the road. And, unless we've got a lot of dynamite, that's going to continue to be that way. So that's been a thing. I do have some issues with people. They often don't think about their own properties. I mean, something as simple as snow storage. When somebody's getting ready to build a house and they're putting in a driveway and a septic system and everything, and I bet I've been here for 25 years or more, worked in the building office, planning, zoning, did public works, and I bet I can count on one hand the number of people who said, oh yeah, and here's my site plan, here's my driveway, I'm going to store snow over here. That's never in the conversation. And so what we frequently run into is that, well, my snow's coming out of my driveway, I'm going to plow it across the road onto Jim's driveway, or into his property. And so we run into that sometimes. Tom talked about the crown on a driveway. I mean, if you drive around any driveway that's over 5 years old, I would say there's maybe 10% of those have that crown left. It usually turns into a wheel track, a W shape. And so that becomes, it's basically ditch, road track, ditch, another ditch. So that the road, the water comes down that way. And so, a little bit of hard pack, a little bit of grading, a rake, can help that. And some people, if you're in the middle of a storm, and my guys do this, they're driving around town, and people always go, oh, those guys are always driving around town. Well, sometimes you can fix with 5 minutes with a shovel, you can save thousands of dollars in erosion and headaches. And but so you've got to be out there in the rain to see, oh yeah, geez, that's going down the middle of my driveway. I should cut in a little water bar and then come back and maybe should reshape that. And so then the water that comes down the middle of the driveway that runs into the road, it ices up. We're over there dumping salt on it, and it's those are some of the things that I see a lot of. It's again, having these types of seminars and whatnot is good to just help people sort of think about, okay, I'm not running 60 miles of road, but I do have, 600 feet of driveway that I'm in charge of. So in essence, I'm a public works guy because I gotta do my own stuff, and get that plowed and so forth. So.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. We'll move to the Lake Association. I actually have multiple lake associations. We have Crystal Lake represented here as well tonight. Talk about that. I mean, we talked about all the stuff that you presented to us. Obviously, there's maintenance that has to be done on all that stuff. How do you guys work as as a membership organization with property owners on the lake to sort of foster that environment of keeping things maintained properly and planning for these events? Tell us about your efforts as an association and what kind of things that maybe you're having some success with and some of the challenges.
Well, I think it's education is part of what the Lake Association tries to do. Tries to promote pumping the septic systems out frequently enough. Oftentimes, I'll go. We have annual meetings, and I'll give a water quality report, but it's a bunch of numbers up there, but at the end, I usually say, well, to keep the water good and good quality, don't use phosphorus. Don't use fertilizer on your lawns, and I'll put about 10 different things up underneath there to try to, get them thinking about that. What they should be doing, but I find too that the old timers who some of them have said to me, I wouldn't put my toe in Mascoma Lake You know, they're thinking back to the old days, the Baltic Mill was dumping stuff in there.
Dyeing the water red.
That's right, yeah. And, you know, the town of Enfield, I remember when we moved here, and I happened to find out that this town didn't have a sewer system. I says, is this a third world country up here or what? You know? So I went along the banks of the Mascoma, and sure enough, I took pictures of pipe outfalls, you know, the sewers going right into the river, and then of course right into the lake. And so those pictures helped me sell the idea of the town to, you know, finance a bond issue to put a sewer system in. But the old ideas sometimes take a long time to
Yeah,
change.
they do.
Yeah.
Mhm. Jim brought up a great point, I think, talking about snow, and you mentioned it too. I mean, obviously, that's a big part of our stormwater, and it can be very challenging because you get giant snowstorm, and it sort of suspends in a pile of snow, and then it warms up to 70 degrees in the middle of the winter, and all of a sudden, you get all of that, you know, could be 3 or 4 inches worth of rain in the 20 inches of snow that's all melting at the same time. So that's got to be a challenge for all three of you guys, is the snow and obviously, you know, Public Works, you're trying to use as little salt as possible. We all expect our roads to be bare after a storm, and the only way that you can do that is to put some salt down. Tell us about that. I mean, that's a big challenge. You guys are using sand and salt, and
Yep, and a mixture of the two.
yeah, obviously there's technology there and training and so forth. And you've got to teach your drivers how to do it. You guys all have to teach your contractors or whoever's plowing your snow how to do it and how to do it right. You want to talk about that a little bit? The snow challenges?
Snow challenge is something, and you know, 2 years ago we had a winter where it froze like on January 2nd and it thawed on March 20, and that was awesome. I mean, that is just absolutely fabulous for the DPW, because for us it's, you know, you get the snow, you can plow the snow, and you know, at cold temperatures, you know, snow is drivable in a lot of cases. You know, you get that squeaky snow, and it, you know, your tires press in. You know, the converse of that is last year, where you know you have, you know, 5 or 6 micro mud seasons and lots of rain and that kind of stuff, and it's right around 32. So you know, the rain comes and then it freezes and then it thaws, and you got to retreat and retreat and retreat. And so we went through, you know, I think almost twice as much road salt and maybe half again as much sand last year as we did the year before, even though we had way less snow. And so, you know, that's a reality. And people are like, oh, well, what have you guys been doing? There hasn't been any snow. And I'm like, yeah, these guys have been out, you know, night and day because of these, you know, funky conditions. So that's a challenge. You know, finding places to put snow. You know, if you get a really snowy year, and you know, the banks start to climb and get high, you know, we can push them back only so many times, and then, you know, downtown particularly, we're having to haul snow, and so where do we haul it to? We don't really have a good spot to dump it. I know Hanover, I think they dump it Sachin Field or someplace like that. You know, we don't have that kind of thing. And thankfully, we don't have to do it as often as most towns. Most towns have to do it almost every storm that they get. They are having to haul snow out of the downtown. But yeah, we've used that. We've you know, we've ordered our first truck that will actually have a computerized spreader on it, which will sort of match the application. You set the application rate that you want, and the device is tied into the transmission, so it knows how fast the truck is going and will match the chain and the spinner to that speed. Other than that, you know, you're just guessing. You know, they have hydraulic settings, and you know, they might be spreading, you know, 100 pounds per lane mile if they're going 20 miles an hour, but maybe they're going a little bit faster, and so then it's not enough or it's too much. And so we hope to have our trucks swapped over to that in the future. We're also using liquids where we We'll pre-treat a road with, a brine solution. And we also treat the salt itself with a brine solution. And if you folks have followed, a salt truck or a state truck or something, and you watch the kernels of rock salt hit the pavement and boom, 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 right off the edge of the road, that's money you're losing. And, but if we pre-wet that salt, it will usually stay where it falls, and it works to a lower temperature, and it's less corrosive too. That's the other sort of bump by doing this.
I've worked with Nick. Nick is the engineer on the big job that's happening right now, as a matter of fact, on Sugar Boulevard. And that one obviously it's a big stormwater. That's the
Yeah.
Dartmouth sailing facility. Tell us about some of the work that you guys are doing on that particular project. Obviously, it's a big site, but it's representative of what's happening lakeshore in Enfield.
Yeah, that one definitely required a shoreline permit. It was just small enough. Well, the actual activities on the site were well small enough that alteration of terrain wasn't needed. But what we're doing there is we've installed a series of small rain gardens around the buildings that are going to be put up there, and so those will take and hold and detain the water again for a slower release, and they'll provide some treatment as well. Again, there we're sitting on top of ledge for most of the site, so infiltration is not really much of an option. So really, it's about holding the water for as long as we can before we release it, and it's a concentrated release. Once they're leaving the rain gardens, then they are piped to the lake instead of running overground and again picking up just either leaf litter or twigs or stuff like that to pick up.
That's you got to go ahead, follow up.
Well, yeah, Jim and I were talking earlier, and of course, one of the concerns of the lake is the trend seems to be that the conductivity of the water in the lake is gradually increasing. And that means that the lake has more of these pollutants in it, and as a result, the water that has high conductivity is denser than the other water that's cleaner. So that tends to fall to the bottom of the lake. It ends up sitting at the bottom of the lake, this higher density water. And so one of the good things about lakes is they have a turnover twice a year where the water, say at the top goes to the bottom and the bottom water comes up to the top, so it all gets aerated, and that's great for fish and all that. So, but if there's a dense layer at the bottom, you're not going to have that turnover there. So I was glad when you mentioned it. Anything to, reduce the amount of salt on the road is a good thing. It reduces the conductivity.
Another thing I was going to throw out there, and this is something that we all need to do as property owners and responsible citizens, is when we have work done to our properties, and we have a contractor on site, as I said earlier, with the snowplow truck drivers, make sure that they're doing a good job. You drive by a construction site, not all contractors work the same. There's some that are really responsible when they set up their site, and they put the silt fence all the way around the contractor's site, because they're just disturbing the earth, and that's really a very vulnerable time when stormwater management becomes absolutely critical, because you've peeled back the grass and you've pulled vegetation and you're doing very disruptive activities. So pay attention to that too. Not all contractors are the same when it comes to that. I've seen some contractors that they go out and they put the hay bale down and stake it down to capture runoff, and the silt fence and check dams, as you were showing. So that's something that's really important. I've driven by the Dartmouth site, and they're doing a great job with regard to that and other sites. But it's something that we all need to sort of insist on, because it's there's some contractors out there that are just not thinking along that. We're just going to bull and jam it. We'll get it done before it rains, and we'll put some hay down. But and Jim and I were talking before this event too, that it's really neat to see that technology and ingenuity has come a long ways too, that, you don't have to just shake out a bale of hay now. You can actually buy rolls of jute matting that is actually stuff you can actually lay down and actually stake it down, so it's going to hold no matter how hard it rains. And that's, I don't know, those are some of the sort of advancements that maybe we were touching on a little earlier. Jim, we were talking about, now all the culverts we use under roads and driveways are plastic. They're going to last way longer than the old galvanized steel ones that rot out on us. So
Oh, yeah.
we've got culverts we've got a guy that works here. He remembers putting that culvert in, and now it's junk. It's all, rotted out. And it's kind of fun to see that. Talk
Yeah,
about some
man.
of the advancements in
Yeah,
technology.
we've got up back here right now that's going probably the next couple days. We have a 40-yard roll-off that is just junk metal culverts. And if you go up there, you just go, oh my God, how did that ever work? And some of them did, some of them didn't, but they would typically rust out in the bottom. So, those plastic culverts are good. They last longer. They do need to be supported. They're not quite as strong as a metal one unless you get the really expensive ones. But we hope to get more of a service life out of them. And in a couple places over the years, they had put culverts in, big culverts in, brooks or large streams. And we have replaced a couple of those with bridges, and what a difference that has made. We did Lovejoy Brook Road, and most recently this summer we've done one on Oak Hill Road. And Oak Hill Road, that was a 9-foot round culvert, and it was put in 1995, and it was rusted all along the bottom and was on the state red list. And a bridge should last more than 30 years, really. It should be longer than that. So we replaced that with a bridge, and it has a lot of advantages because you open up the channel, you don't have the sort of the concentration of the flow that prevents amphibians and fish and things from moving back and forth through that. We had taken out the old culvert just ahead of that awful storm we had in July. And I'm glad we did, because I think that culvert would have ended up in Crystal Lake. I really do. There was so much water coming out of Grafton Pond that, the spillway, usually it's like a sheet that falls down. But this one was cascading out almost all the way across the barrel and hitting the road on the other side, because there was so much water there. And it was very rewarding to go down. This was a few weeks after we had done that. You could look down and you could see where that culvert had been. I could look down and I could actually see fish in the water. And when that culvert was there was too much water pressure there, and it would just keep them, downstream all the time. And so that's been a thing. And then the Lovejoy Brook culvert, that was an area that flooded about once every 3 years. And since we replaced that, we haven't had a flood, behind that site. And so that's been a big improvement.
Questions? We're coming to the end of our time. I want to offer an opportunity for any of you guys to ask questions, and I will also remind you that these three are obviously available too. If you ever have questions, reach out to them. So, questions from the public? Go ahead.
I have a question for the Enfield, Lake Mascoma Association. And you mentioned a little bit about contractors in the building process. But going forward, regular seasonal contractors doing work at residences, do you think they're adequately trained in these ways? And are there services, do homeowners know who does a good job and who doesn't? How do you disseminate that type of information, or do you?
Well, I don't have a list of, but it's a good point. I think we're hoping maybe the homeowners through meetings like this learn a little bit more about what their options are, and can ask the contractors some good questions about how do you plan to handle this or that, or what would you do with the runoff from this portion of and that kind of thing. So I guess there's no rating system for contractors for
Google reviews.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
More questions, yeah.
No, not really a question, just to add to the comment. There are sources for information on contractors and many other groups. New Hampshire Lakes is one of the great sources for that. They have all kinds of information on contractors, septic system designers, the whole 9 yards. And I would recommend anybody who, moving forward, if they have questions about the quality of a contractor, contact somebody like that, or yourself and Jim also. Excuse me.
I think Jim made a really great point too, though, just coming back to that, is when it's raining really hard, we all have a temptation to get inside where it's dry and stay out of the rain. But actually, sometimes the best thing you can do is put on your galoshes and maybe a junk hat and take a shovel out and walk around your property and watch what's happening. Pay attention. You will see troubles as they arise. And sometimes just a little scoop of wet leaves and sticks out in front of a culvert save your driveway, save your house, save your septic system, whatever it is. So that's my advice there. Somebody else had a question. Yeah, right here. You had the same thing?
I'm from New Hampshire Lakes. We're trying to build a Lake Smart Service Provider Partner program across the state, across a variety of disciplines. So septic, water people, architectures, engineers, landscapers, all of that. And they go through an application process with us, and we make sure that they're doing their work in a lake-friendly way, and then we advocate for them, and then they also support our program at the same time. So it's pretty small right now, but we see that a lot when we go out, and people are like, who can I trust to do this work right? So we're really trying to build that community. So.
A lot of the licensing programs, like for professional loggers or septic designers and installers, there are classes on stuff like managing erosion control, perimeter control, and a lot on the technology that contractors can or should be using.
Yeah.
And how to, they stress this a lot, how to get help.
Yeah.
Before
Right.
it's a
I want to
problem.
also tell people too is that you can sort of adopt your own little realm, your own lot, and kind of keep an eye out for stuff. I mean, I send the guys out and it takes them 4 hours on 3 or 4 different routes to sort of drive all around town. But I mean, if you're seeing something like a clogged culvert that's more than you want to dig out, or something that's frozen, frozen culverts, it's got ice in it or whatever, give us a call, and we usually can run right out and do that. And we have a steam jet cleaner, and that's another technology thing is that they have these nozzles, a jetting nozzle that you put on the thing, and you start to feed it in, and the thing it has sprays some of this liquid forward and some back, so it sort of eats into the ice, but it's also clearing out stuff as it goes through, compared to the old days where we just had this great big pipe with a pole on it, and the guys are trying to jam it through the culvert, and so that's been revolutionary. But it doesn't work if it's if the damage is done. So if you folks see stuff like that, that's we want to know that.
Yeah, see something, say something. We
Right.
love to have, adopt a road if you see something too. I mean, we go out and we patrol, but you guys are also driving the road, so if you see something, absolutely. You had a question right here?
More of a comment than a question along the lines of how do you find good people is that I know New Hampshire DES for snow treatment has is it the Green Safe? Green Snow
was
program.
gonna raise my hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that's a great program that a lot of public works departments have attended, and I think individual contractors that do snow removal can be a part of that program.
There's another one called snow fighting.
Yeah.
We work with them.
Yes.
So at the moment, only private contractors can become Green Snow Pro certified,
Right.
but we are working on the municipal rules, and you're already doing a lot of these best management
Yeah,
practices.
we hosted the snow fighters here about a month ago.
Love that.
Nice.
So when you were talking, oh my God, look at them go. This is fantastic.
Another question right over here.
I have
Sir. Oh, sorry,
I
you
have
still
a
going?
second. Along the lines of salt and personal responsibility for step 2, I think I appreciated your comments about the conductivity in the lakes and pumping your septic systems and stuff like that. And one additional sort of place where people can have an impact on reducing salt into water systems as well is with water treatment, water softeners. And so ensure before you install a water softener, ensure that you actually need a water softener. Otherwise, you're just backwashing salty water for no reason into your property. And I've worked with a couple of lakes that have seen increases in conductivity after a lot of water softeners have been installed in properties around their lakes. So.
Sir, right over here, you had
Yeah.
something.
That's a great comment. I think a culvert is a work of art, and I've really become morbidly fascinated with them. The Oak Hill example is a palace. It's just gorgeous. So, congratulations.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the jetter thing in just a minute, but has there been a change in town engineering to really ditch the sides of the road? Because back when we moved in years and years ago, it always seemed to be kind of a swale leading up to the asphalt. But now it's a really aggressive ditch, and as a result, downhill water pulls all of the leaves and the sand right down to the bottom, and it erodes underneath the asphalt in certain places. So if you're a homeowner, as we are, at the bottom of the hill, you get this kind of deep ditch that's hard to work around. And then when you look at your culvert, the work of art that I keep hoping, but we don't have, it's always clogged up. And the last time I called the town about this, they said, well, the culvert isn't really our property, it's your property.
Oh, is it a driveway culvert?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. And they explained about the jetter and stuff. And, it's pretty expensive. I think we'd all like to do our part more. There's some obstacles that are in the way.
Yeah, I mean, we have been digging the ditches deeper so they have more storage. But the other thing too is in the springtime, having the deeper ditch, it gets more water out of the roadbed, so you don't have as bad of frost heaves. And, particularly with the, like the dirt roads and things, you don't end up with as much mud. It kind of wicks out from underneath. And I don't know if you've been down Shaker Hill Road, those haven't been ditched properly for many, many years. And you can see that the frost heave situation is awful. I mean, it's just every year.
And there's pooling water in the road.
In the road, and it's not good. And so, we use an inordinate amount of salt on Shaker Hill Road because of those reasons. And so,
It's a state road.
Yeah, that's right. We don't do the summer maintenance. We're stuck with the winter maintenance there.
But it is on the homeowner to fix a culvert, or if it's more than a shovelful, move debris. And you
Yeah.
can't go in further, and you can't reach it with the ordinary supplies.
Yes,
on
I
hand.
know. It's
still on us, right?
That's tough. Yes,
Okay.
it is. But I mean, we can come and dig a little bit out from both sides to sort of help do that. But yeah, I mean, it's the proverbial ounce of prevention to try to keep that stuff out of there to begin with. And yeah, I know your site. It's kind of a long run down through there. So.
Had another question in the back.
Yeah, a couple comments and then a question. The first comment is we've recently had some work done on our property. And one of the first things that both contractors did was put down the snakes, the straw snakes and the fabric snakes to protect downstream, the lake and all. Second comment is I agree with you about feeling totally distressed when I see water running down the stream that dissects our property, and the water is brown, and it's going into Crystal Lake, just like it goes into Mascoma Lake. And you watch that brown just kind of billow out, and you think, what the hell is in that? What is coming down here? And that leads to my question, which might be more to DES than anybody else. Why? So you get all the silt, you get all the sand and the crap that's in it, and then you get cyanobacter or whatever that comes with it. But then if you want to remove that, you want to try and get a dredging permit. I'm keep being told that, well, you can't do that, they're not going to allow that. Why on earth can we not get this stuff out of our lakes? Because it's contaminating our lakes. And we didn't want it there, we didn't put it there. It's not our fault, but it's affecting our lakes, it's affecting the value of our properties and everything else. Why can't we dredge it out?
I honestly am not sure. That's not really my section that I work in. Part of it, and this is just a kind of educated guess, don't hold me to it. I know that when you dredge, you can do more damage because you're stirring up what's at the bottom. You could have metals down there that you're not aware of. So you dredge it up, the turnover happens later on, and all this nasty stuff gets into the water, and it makes it worse than it was before.
But this stuff is so deep, it's not, nothing's turning over.
It's
just collecting.
Yeah.
And God knows what's in it.
I honestly don't know, to tell you the truth. I don't even know who.
It's the wetlands. It's the wetlands.
Is it the wetlands? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Now that I think about it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, to tell you the truth.
Further
Sorry.
questions? We're almost out of time. Olivia.
I was curious, we're talking a lot about the lakefront, and I'm curious what you guys see, if you see strategies that are implemented uphill that can have an effect on, some of what's happened, that compounding factors that happen downhill, and if, even if maybe those don't require permitting, and maybe are easier to install. Are you seeing cases where things are happening uphill and having a broader impact downhill?
Have you seen that in town, or?
Well, we've done some. We have, and we did one most recently up here next to a new building that we just built. Is we've been kind of installing our own little sediment ponds in places where it's number one you can get to maintain, but on some of the turnouts on some of the hills and things, we'll essentially dig out. It might be the size of a large hot tub, and just kind of get down and then kind of armor the outfall a little bit on the thing, so that stuff that's coming down carrying that silt, kind of gets in there, settles out, and then it sort of runs into the woods. But then we can get in there with the backhoe and scoop that sand up and bring it back, and we can recycle it, actually dry it out and do that kind of thing. So we've done some of that. But yeah, around here, there's not, again, Enfield, the lowest elevation in Enfield is the surface of Mascoma Lake. So that's a huge challenge, and lots of steep hills and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of homeowners will do something if they have a long driveway, especially if they have a gravel driveway, where the runoff is really just causing erosion on their, as it's rolling down the edge of their driveway, it's causing erosion and causing problems, and it's just fast releasing. So we've done a couple of small projects to help them control that rate. So at least they don't want to pave the driveway, but they want to control the stormwater. So it's sort of a longer term fix instead of just coming back every year and fixing it. So it's like the water bars or some diversions or some sediment areas. So it's a small fix, and if a lot more people did that, it could have a longer fix down the road, because you don't have long driveway after long driveway adding to all the flows going in. And then with a lower down on commercial redevelopment, just about everybody now has to do some sort of stormwater attenuation for a commercial project, so those can help as well.
I would also tell you guys about, we have somebody in the room right here
Yeah.
from NRCS, which is Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of the United States Department of Agriculture, formerly Soil Conservation. What we're talking about right now is right in their wheelhouse. Absolutely reach out to her if you want to say a few things. That would be awesome.
Sure, yeah. So unfortunately we're currently not allowed to work with public lands. It's tied to the Farm Bill, so we'll see if that changes with the new Farm Bill. But we work with private landowners and land leasers, producers, to basically to improve any kind of concerns we have in terms of environmental problems, conservation issues.
And we have a financial assistance program where we'll actually incentivize you with some money to do a lot of the practices we've been talking about here on your property. And we also have a technical assistance side of things. So if you just have questions, we have a whole bunch of planners. I serve Grafton County with a few other planners, and actually NRCS serves every county in the nation. So we're a very widespread agency. And so if you're curious, we'll come out to your site. There's a table out there with everybody's contact information for Grafton County, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah, they do incredible work, and it really was. I think the original purpose was after the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression.
Yep. Yeah.
Literally, we lost millions and millions of tons of prime agricultural soil out west because they weren't doing the right thing with the farmland, and it was a nightmare. And so these guys came along and started saying, we can prevent that. We can do things to slow down the loss of this and the siltation of the lakes. I think.
Yep.
High traffic areas, all that kind of stuff that you guys do. It's really cool.
Yeah, we were all about soil conservation at first and erosion mitigation, and then we were like, well, I guess we could deal with all the natural resources.
So absolutely talk to her if you guys have questions. I think we're just about out of time here. Jim and I are available if anybody wants to go out to the shop and see some of the cool toys that we get to play with on a daily basis. Some of them, as Jim said, are pretty cool and are transformative. And we're happy to, call me anytime if you ever have any questions. I'm pretty good at bringing resources to bear for you if you have any questions, and Jim and other members of our panel here. So we really appreciate you guys all coming, and hopefully this continues conversation in the future. And have a great night. Thanks.